Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. Tonight, we are going to be celebrating Grand Seiko's many mesmerizing dials. I'm George Mayer with WatchBox, and I'm joined by Joe Kirk, the Grand Curator and National Trainer for Grand Seiko, along with our friend and favorite horological illustrator, Sunflowerman, who you can follow on Instagram by that same handle. And while you're at it, please make sure to follow WatchBox and Grand Seiko USA if you're not already. Welcome, Joe, and welcome, Sunflowerman.
Hello,
Joe,
hello.
how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Here we are again. I see you more on Zoom than in real life, that's for sure.
Yeah.
True. I think this is true for anyone nowadays, right?
Yeah, the way of the world.
Exactly.
So before we dive in, we hope you have all been staying safe and healthy over these last several months. We've had some incredible events with Grand Seiko over the years, and I will never forget the reaction of one of Grand Seiko's master watchmakers when I miraculously reassembled a movement of theirs. Wow, was I lucky. The reaction on his face was, how did this guy who had no chance pull this off? I assure you we have photos to prove it, but I digress. While we wish tonight's event could be in person as well, we have a great program on tap nonetheless. As collectors and admirers of Grand Seiko, the team at WatchBox is constantly in awe of Grand Seiko's stunning textured dials, the unique inspiration behind them, and the brand's unwavering commitment to precision. Tonight, Joe will explore the manufacturing process, recently introduced collections, and of course, our favorite dials, some of which I'll have in hand. Meanwhile, Sunflowerman will bring some of these dials to life with his illustrations. At the end, we will hold a Q&A for the remaining time so we can hear from you. All right, let's do this. Sunflowerman, what are you working on over there?
So right now we are working on the SBGA 427 with the dark, I don't know what the official dial color is. I'm going to call it slate gray. So we'll be working on this piece right here. If you all saw on Instagram recently, we just did the process for this piece. This will be a little bit more of a fast-paced illustration. We'll go a little bit bolder with these dark inks, and we'll do broad color strokes. But it's the same idea, and we'll focus on the dial mostly.
Awesome. And these are great new pieces, the SBGA 427 and the 429. So I dig it. You're a talented man. I've seen your work, and very impressive. We're going to be checking in with you throughout the night. But now, without further ado, here's Grand Seiko brand curator, Joe Kirk.
Thank you, George. I'll go ahead and share my screen while we get rolling here. But just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. On behalf of everyone at Grand Seiko Corporation of America, we're grateful to be here with WatchBox and George and to hopefully have a good time with you guys. You know, we can't do it in person, unfortunately, right now, but we'll make the best of the virtual experience as we can. And we wanted to do something really special for you tonight. This is something we haven't done in any of our webinars or even in any of the trainings. Part of my responsibility as brand curator is also being the national trainer for Grand Seiko in the US. So today, we're going to be exploring dials, hence the name you've been reading, Dialed In. So we're really excited to kind of explore the manufacturing process, the stories, everything that goes into Grand Seiko dials, right? We talk a lot about our movements. We talk a lot about Zaratsu finishing, but this is going to be a little different approach. So I hope everyone's excited about it. We look forward to sharing it with you, and I won't stall any longer. So to start, we'll probably go with the model that people know most, right? The snowflake. This is by far, you know, the icon of Grand Seiko nowadays, and with good reason, right? So when we talk about the snowflake, we are talking about a tribute to the hometowns of Spring Drive. This is a tribute to their hometowns' winters, and the whole concept derived actually from the movement. So the Spring Drive caliber, the 9R65 that you would find inside the snowflake, this particular caliber, the rotor bridge on the back, you can kind of see the mountain peak on the back of the watch, and it's supposed to represent the Hotaka and Joen mountain range as they meet the woodland area, and the design, the architecture of the movement itself is inspired by the mountainous region of Japan where they make the watch. Now, for the snowflake, we wanted to take it a step further, right? We had introduced the 9R65 in 2004 in the Japanese market, and 2005 they introduced the snowflake to the Japanese market. And the concept was very simple. The dial is made to mimic the snowfall after it's been swept by the wind overnight. The case is titanium. It's a high intensity titanium. This is a special alloy that has higher hardness and can receive Zaratsu polishing, but it makes it as light as a snowflake. It's very comfortable, right? And then the blue accents give it that cold feeling of winter. And so this is the tribute to the Shinshu region of Japan. In central Japan, Shiojiri is the name of the city where they make the watch, that has really a special attachment to this, for this watch, connecting the wearer to the factory, the manufacturer, and the actual craftsmen and women behind these watches who live in that Shinshu region of Japan, which I think is really special. I know that's what connected me to the watch, you know, and I feel that probably a lot of you out there feel the same way. So this texture, right, the snowflake dial, this texture has really gained a lot of recognition in the watch world. People love our textured dials. So the concept to how to make it look like snowfall actually came from a 1971 vintage model of Grand Seiko. So the 56GS, they made a special model that had an 18 karat gold case that was hammered with a dial that had this great difference in elevation, this unusual texture. And so this was the inspiration on how we were going to make the snowflake dial. Obviously, this being from the early 70s, we're not going to use the same techniques. Also, it's a tonneau-shaped watch, very unusual in Grand Seiko, I will admit. But this is what really has influenced the manufacturing technique. So when you think of the snowflake dial, right, you think it's a very complex process, and it is. The actual dial manufacturing process, when kind of elaborated on, if you've been to events where we have the dial diagrams, you'll see this, right? It looks like an 8-step process, basically. You start with a brass dial plate. Then from there, you go and you apply 200 tons of pressure, right? And this pressure is applying the texture. So the texture is carved into a mold and then pressed into the brass dial base. Then we cut it to shape, and then the white color is actually achieved not by paint, but actually through silver plating process. So a galvanization to achieve this silver color, this white silver color. Now, it takes a lot of people by surprise that we're actually doing a plating process to achieve this snow white color, but this is our own special technique. So then from there, we apply thick, clear coating, and we we'll do the polishing of the final layer of the dial, pad print on all the text, add the hour markers by hand in the Grand Seiko logo, and then we have a finished dial. Well, it sounds like 8 steps, but in reality, there's actually over 80 individual steps in manufacturing the snowflake dial. So there's a lot more that goes into it. Today, you're seeing more than most people, but there's a lot more that goes into it than just this. So, you know, I hope this gives you a better idea. This is the main process of how we make our textured dials. So we call press patterning, right? When we apply pressure, also known as stamping. And we call it press patterning because it's more of a proprietary technique. We actually have, using the snowflake as an example, we can create differences in height just to create the texture. The difference in height is 0.04 millimeters difference in elevation to create this very ultra fine texture. So to give you an idea, if we put paint on this dial, it would mask the actual texture. That's why we have to do the galvanization. So this is a very, very ultra fine texture, and that's why we call it press patterning. So here's an example of the pad printing process. We typically do at least a couple of layers of the Grand Seiko logo and the spring drive text on the dial. We even make the gelatin molds, as we'll call them, in-house, which is remarkable. Of course, all the processes, and I'm sure you know you guys are watch connoisseurs, so you've heard Grand Seiko is a vertical manufacturer, right? We make everything in-house. Dials are no exception. Our movements, of course, and cases and stuff like that. Yes, but at the same time, the dial manufacturing process and many, many different complex processes all done in-house as well. So that's the gist of the snowflake dial. And with that said, I can basically explain, I have basically explained every dial in our collection that is textured, more or less. The press patterning technique remains the same. The pattern will change. But when you look at the snowflake, for example, we had to figure out a different electroplating process to achieve the sky blue color, right? To have the dial look like the sky reflecting off the snow in the mountains in Shinshu. So that was the concept behind this particular case in our Elegance collection, this particular dial in our Elegance collection. And, you know, it really is something special. You know, the blue snowflake, the white snowflake that we all know are two of our top selling models nowadays, with the blue snowflake being a very new addition just introduced last year. I'm sure George can attest that I'm selling.
I love that. I love that watch. The dial is gorgeous. That light little baby blue. I have the original, you know, or the regular titanium snowflake here. We can get a quick zoom in on that. The one that Joe is now segueing into is steel and on a strap, but here's the titanium version, $5,800 retail, unbelievable value. You know, 80 steps to the dial, as Joe just was talking about. This is a wow watch.
So to expand on the snowflake collection, we did, you know, we're introducing a few different styles. In 2019, at least, we started to introduce a few different styles of snowflake. So the blue was one example. Now, this is a very special piece that's very difficult to get. They're produced in very small quantities and has the snowflake dial, but you'll notice there's no power reserve indicator and there is no date. This is our new 9R31 manual wind spring drive movement. And because this is a new movement and because of new levels of finishing, new proprietary dual spring in one barrel, and this new case design, everything about this watch is more complex. So the production quantities are insanely small right now, but you know, of course, if you're interested, we have to, you know, track one down for you probably at the moment, but this is a very special piece, and there's nothing to interrupt the beautiful snowflake dial, which I think everyone was excited to see. Was no power reserve, no date, just clean, classic, and then part of our Elegance collection, more of a dress watch, but realistically you can get away with it for every day as well. So going more into the textured dials that utilize the same processes as the snowflake is one from our Shizukuishi manufacturer. So this is in northern Japan, right? The snowflake's made in central Japan. Our high beat caliber, as you'll see here with the SBGJ 201, is made in northern Japan in the Iwate prefecture. And the largest mountain in the Iwate prefecture is actually visible from the Shizukuishi studio where we make our watches. So this mountain is a dominant force of the skyline, no matter where you're at in the city of Morioka where we make these. And to pay tribute to this huge mountain, also nicknamed Nambu Fuji, because it's basically the same style, the same shape of mountain as Mount Fuji, smaller, yes, but one of the largest mountains in northern Japan. And like I said, you can see it right from the windows of our studio. So for this particular dial, the ridges of Mount Iwate, we do the same type of manufacturing technique, the press patterning to achieve, but this dial has such a fine pattern, you really need to get under it with a loop, right? This entire dial has almost a fibrous type texture, and these little ridges of the dial are supposed to emulate the ridges of Mount Iwate. So a very special watch, just as special as the snowflake in many, many ways, and also pays tribute to the hometown of where we make our high beat caliber. So along with the SBGJ 201, the model SBGJ 203, which is actually what I'm wearing today. And most days I do wear this watch, whether it be this, a snowflake. I also have a spring drive chronograph that I wear pretty regularly. This is one of my favorites because it's so subtle and it's a perfect contrast to the snowflake, right? The snowflake is titanium. It's got a white dial. It's got blue accents. Great, great color. And this particular dial is black with red accents and has the 44GS case design, our most iconic case design. So it's stainless steel. So it's the perfect contrast of the snowflake. I feel like they should sell it in a set, because if you have a snowflake, you'll probably want one of these too. And one is spring drive and the other is high beat, the two pinnacle movements of Grand Seiko. So really a lot of special symbolism in this dial and to this particular studio. So while I'm talking about Shizukuishi, George, I don't know if you've heard of this yet, but we just announced last week that we have now opened our new studio in Shizukuishi, in the city Morioka, in the town of Shizukuishi, neighboring where we used to have the manufacturer. We have this new over 20,000 square foot, 2-floor studio called Grand Seiko Studio Shizukuishi.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Hope to be there one day.
Well,
God
hopefully
willing.
once, yeah. So once the situation becomes more stable, this will be available for people to tour, which is great. And we're actually going to have full-time staff there who's capable of English guided tours. So that's going to be great. And this has been designed by a renowned architect named Kengo Kuma. He's also, you may have heard of him earlier this year when we announced he was designing the boutique that was opened in Place Vendôme in Paris. So really unique, aspect of design. His designs are amazing. He also was responsible for the 2020 Olympic Stadium, now 2021. This gentleman has quite the reputation, and much like Grand Seiko, influenced very much by nature. So when you look at this new studio, obviously very heavy in the wood influence, but also very much glass. And the glass surrounding this studio is so that the craftsmen and women can see into the neighboring woods, the trees surrounding, the beautiful nature surrounding their studio. So, and this peak, this point at the top of the building you see here is actually pointing at Mount Iwate. And so there's a little lounge upstairs also that you'll be able to like sit in a little window view and observe Mount Iwate as well. So very much a symbol of our Shizukuishi studio.
How many facilities is that for you now in Japan?
So we have two. For Grand Seiko, we have two primary studios, right? We have Shizukuishi, which was in the same general area as this new studio. It was kind of built behind it's adjacent to the old manufacturer. This studio has about 20 craftsmen and women here responsible for all the 9S calibers. So, and then we make spring drive in central Japan, as well as our 9F quartz. So those are, but we have kind of two studios within one. We have our core Grand Seiko lineup, like the snowflakes and the quartz and all those, core line models. And then we have our micro artist studio, which I brought some stuff I'm going to share with you as well later about the micro artist studio. So I'm excited for that because some stuff that not a lot of people have seen. So this is going to be the inside of our new studio. Right now, we only have, as I mentioned, roughly about 20 craftsmen and women for all of our 9S series mechanical calibers. Our goal is to grow in the future, but it can take 10 years to become a Grand Seiko bronze level certified Meister or watchmaker. So while we're planning for the future, we're not quite there yet. So it'll be several years before we can add more watchmakers to our studio.
One question about the watchmakers. Are they typically homegrown, or do you get watchmakers from another brand? What percentage would you say are come through your system and are trained under you the whole time, or come from somewhere else, like from Switzerland or whatever path it may be?
Vast majority are homegrown. So, our watchmakers are typically from these towns. Now, occasionally, obviously, there will be some differences. And I've even heard of some watchmakers who have spent some time in some other regions, but it's uncommon, we'll say. So most of them are very local, which I think is great too, because when you look at watches like the Snowflake and the ridges of Mount Iwate dial, they're tributes to the hometown of the watchmakers, and it's not just that they live there now. You know, most of them have lived there their entire life, and their families are from there. And these are very special regions of Japan too. You know, again, we hope to, you know, see you there one day with some great selfies at the new Shizukuishi studio. But you know, once travel becomes possible again, of course. But you know, the towns that Grand Seiko watches are very, you know, it's not Tokyo. It's very rural, very you know, clean air, clean water, little dust. That's why we're there. So kind of you know, off the grid, let's say. So George, I don't know if you're a big fan of this particular model, the SBGA 413.
I most certainly am, and I have one right here, in fact. So,
well, good. I have no idea what you have in front of you, so I'm glad I asked. It made it seem like I knew, so that's good.
So this is one part of the Seasons collection, and I love all four, and they're all so different. You know, you need one for every quarter, you know, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's just a vibrant dial that, you know, really just, it's not ostentatious yet. When you see it, it has this subtle pop to it. And you can just tell that, you know, the process by which, I mean, you have a much better appreciation for when you talk about the snowflake dial. I mean, you see everything that goes into it, and there's really nothing like them. You know, I mean, they're very different. They're very unique. And again, you know, I come back to the value that is Grand Seiko, and I mean, you see how much is put into each of these watches. You know, the process, but then also the passion. You know, the watchmakers who, you know, as you just said, you know, they're from there. There's Japanese culture involved in these watches, and yeah, I mean, this watch I think might even be one of the most popular out of the Four Seasons pieces. So
we're seeing the same. So you know. Unfortunately, there's a lot of you know, challenges delivering these watches, especially the Shunbun, as you see here, the Shunbun and the Taisetsu, the winter model, which both share the same dial pattern. So these are made by press patterning also, but a couple different things you'll notice. One is that this is kind of a more organic pattern, right? It's not all going kind of in one direction. It's very inconsistent in terms of the pattern direction. And you got to keep in mind these molds too, when they make the molds for the press patterning, are carved by hand. So that's a really cool attribute that not a lot of people know. Also unique about these models is that they're not actually brass dials for these seasons. So I'm not going to tell you what it is, but different material than brass, which is our normal, you know, that's kind of our normal. So, but so yeah, unique dial material, unique dial patterns. And this one has that kind of silvery pink tone. I know in a lot of the photos, it looks a little bit more pink than they will in person. And that's just the way that it interacts with light and shadow. You know, that's a big part of our design aesthetic. Light and shadow are key in Grand Seiko watches, whether it be for the case or the hands or the markers or for the dial. And if you're in bright sunlight, it looks silver. If you're in a darker setting, it's going to look pink. So we apologize that pictures will never do it justice.
It's very true. I was just thinking that to myself. And this is also a watch I think that can be worn by either a man or a woman and look great.
Yeah, it's certainly sold
for those thinking they want to share a watch with their you know, wife. This might be it.
It works. I mean, it weighs nothing. It's a good size. It's 40mm case, so it's not terrible. But the lugs are very short, which is a great feature, and that's very common amongst our watches. Is design-wise, you know, sometimes the specs seem pretty big, but they actually wear smaller, and it's based on designs. Short lug-to-lug length, tapering flat against your wrist. There's a lot of different design elements that make them appear smaller on your wrist than you would imagine. So.
And I saw there was a question I saw. The cost on this, the retail is $6,300.
Correct. Yeah.
So again, I mean, we're fortunate to carry a lot of brands, and Grand Seiko is unquestionably one of the best value brands out there.
Thank you. So this model we call the Shunbun is based on the vernal equinox, right? So in spring, this is based on Japan. I should probably explain. Japan has 24 what they call seki, or micro seasons. So there's 6 micro seasons within each season as we know it. And for our representation of spring, we chose the micro season Shunbun, the vernal equinox. This is the time of year where cherry blossoms will fall to the ground. So this is what laid the inspiration for this dial. For winter, we have the same dial pattern, just different color. Our micro season inspiration was Taisetsu. So this is known as deep snow. So this is the inspiration for this particular dial, is the deep snow, very cold point in time in winter, but kind of a deep gray. And this also has the blued steel second hand that you would see on the snowflake. So none of the other models in the 24 Seki season or Japan's seasons collection will have this particular blued steel second hand.
We're fortunate to have this one as well. Again, $6,300 retail. As Joe said, little colder, but same theme, textured. A great question I saw, Joe, was, is the pattern the same for each piece, or is it unique to each individual piece? I thought that was a great question.
Yeah, so the pattern will be the same. So the pattern, the press, when we do the press patterning, is to achieve consistency, right? Like I said, the hand carved the mold, so there's an organic aspect to that. But because applying the pressure to the breast, the mold to create the texture is the same. So there will be maybe some minute differences depending on depending on finishing processes between our dials sometimes, but it's nothing really that I would say makes it completely unique. But the texture that you see will always be essentially the same. So for the next two seasons, these are not spring drive. So the last two that you saw were spring drive models, right? The SBGA 413 and 415. This model features our high beat 36,000. As I mentioned earlier, this is the other pinnacle, right? Spring drive is a pinnacle for central Japan. In northern Japan, the high beat 36,000 is our other pinnacle movement. So with this particular dial, we have this ultra fine texture. Again, just like the Mount Iwate dial, you want to look at this under a loupe, under a microscope, whatever works best for you, to really see how refined this texture is. When you look at it in person, just kind of let's say at a quick glance, you see kind of vertical lines expressed in the dial. And this picture may not represent it so well, but I encourage everyone to try these on, of course, first. But this picture will show you a little bit better the vertical lines that you can see expressed in the dial. And this is to pay tribute to the beginning of summer, known as Rika. So Rika is, when everything starts to get green again, the green and gold symbolizing the sun and the lush greenery surrounding Morioka, or the Shizukuishi studio. And for this particular dial, the vertical lines express those fields, wind blowing through the fields.
So we have one here, and I think it'll be tough for people to see the texture. Even when I was looking down on it here, it looks like it's a solid dial, a solid green with just applied hour markers, but there's definitely some texture to it. I saw a debate back and forth on whether it's better to have the power reserve or not. I was enjoying that back and forth. That would be a good debate, a good poll question. Frequency creates accuracy. So again, here 36,000 VPH, and your average watch, I'd say 28.8, or there's even some 21.6. So again, precision when it comes to Grand Seiko and high quality dials.
Thank you. All right, so the summer, the Rika model is SBGH 271, and then we have the Shubun, which is representing autumn. And I know everyone thinks of, red, orange, and yellow when they think of autumn. This was a little bit of a different concept for us. So with this, it's the same dial pattern, but the orientation is going horizontally. So when you look at the dial, the lines will be going across as opposed to vertically. So this Shubun is the autumnal equinox, basically inspired by the moonlit sky with clouds moving past the moon. And so this is the inspiration behind this particular dial. So this is SBGH 273.
Joe, we won't let you down.
All right.
We came ready, Here's the last one. So again, hard to see the texture on the dial, but it's there. I think the subtle texture is actually quite cool. Exhibition case back on all these too. So.
Absolutely. These feature our 62 GS case design, which actually has no bezel. So it helps it wear a little bit thinner because there's not the 3-piece case design. So, but it does have a really tall box-shaped sapphire crystal. I think it's just under 2 millimeters tall on the high beats and almost 3 millimeters in height on the spring drives. So expanding on the Seasons collection, Japan Seasons, we introduced 2 models for one of the micro season. And we just did this back in June. We introduced the Soko. So this represents the first frost, basically at the end of autumn. And so the inspiration behind these was the most popular time of year to go see one of the biggest tourist attractions, Arashiyama Bamboo Forest in Kyoto. So the Arashiyama Bamboo Forest laid as inspiration for these 2 particular models. The light is the inspiration behind this model. So like I said earlier, Grand Seiko is always utilizing light and shadow in its design to create dramatic contrast and create a Japanese aesthetic. So 427 is inspired by light. And the 429 with the dark gray dial is going to be inspired
Hold
by
on, Joe.
shadow.
Let me interrupt you real quickly because we got the 427 here.
Excellent.
And I believe that's the one that Sunflowerman is working on currently. Yep.
And I think
we'll be checking in with you shortly on that. And then the shadow, which I've been admiring myself right here. I'm thinking about this. This might be my next pickup personally. I love this. You know, it looks like a vertical satin finish there, and then on the dial, and then that like neon yellow greenish second hand, and then with the power reserve hand, like it's just killer. It brings it all in. $5,000 retail. So again, just exhibition case back, just an unbelievable bang for your buck.
And they've each come with their own crocodile leather with a deployant clasp with matching green stitching. So the 427 in dark green to match the second hand for the stitching with brown crocodile. And then the 429 comes in a dark gray with light green stitching. So these both are inspired by bamboo, obviously, right? The Arashiyama Bamboo Forest. There's 2 ways you can look at it. There's the actual wood of bamboo, which has this very fine grain that's expressed in the vertical satin or hairline finishing that we do for the dial. So this could be one way that you perceive it. The other way is the bamboo forest with light passing through each individual stalk of the hundreds or probably thousands of stalks of bamboo in Arashiyama Bamboo Forest. So this is what inspired our designers in coming up with this new collection for Japan Seasons. I think this dial is one of the most unsung heroes in Grand Seiko. Right, this is probably one of the most complex in our core lineup that we create. Many people call it champagne, referring to the color. We internally call it silk sunray. And I'm showing you a picture of this brush because this brush is some of the most work that our craftsmen and women have to deal with. This brush is used to create the fine sunray pattern that goes onto these watches. And it has to be literally every time these dials are made one by one, has to be cleaned, trimmed, and or replaced every time we make a dial. And it's a very labor-intensive process in that regard. So I'm going to show you a video from the factory that I don't think I've shown anyone outside of one of our training seminars before, where this is your brush. This is your vertical brush. And I apologize for the quality of this video, but you know, we wanted to give you some insight, and this was the only video I had. So in this tray right now is one of the silk sunray dials. And you can see here on the left, once it focuses in, the dial before the polishing or before the sunray finishing is a perfect black mirror polish. And after the sunray, internal name we call F17 sunray finishing, this silk sunray is one of the most interactive with light and shadow of any dial that we've ever created. And so we have to do so many steps. If you think the snowflake is a lot at 80 individual steps, this silk sunray dial is far, far more complex. And I don't have a number to define it of how many individual processes it goes through, but it's a lot. So just to give you an idea, we start with the brass, then we go into a basic polishing, then we go into the mirror polishing, then we'll do an application of the ultra thick silver plating, then we'll do multiple steps of sunray finishing, then we'll apply a light gold electroplating, and then from there we can start finishing off on the last 4 steps that you saw in the snowflake, the application of the printing, the final polishing, excuse me, then into the printing, the application of the markers, et cetera, et cetera. So this dial is one of the most complex, especially in our sweet spot in that $6,300 price range. So see, we've just launched a little survey here. Who likes the power reserve on the dial? Who likes it on the back?
Oh, wow. Great question.
I think there will be a good mix.
Do we see these results live?
I think we will.
Right.
Host and panelists can't vote. Man.
Oh, no.
In the meantime here,
vote.
I will show this champagne-looking dial here.
So yeah, we have many watches actually that utilize this dial manufacturing technique. So SPGA 201, SPGA 283, SPGA 373 with the 44GS case design. These are some of the kind of iconic spring drives, 41 millimeter, 39 millimeter, and 40 millimeter. So
is the only difference case size, Joe?
What's that?
Is the only difference case size?
The case design also. So
yeah, it looks like the 201 looks like it's thicker.
The 201 is a little bit thicker. So it's wider, definitely at 41 millimeters. The 201 shares the same case design as the snowflake, but in stainless steel. The 283 is 39 millimeters, so it's a little bit smaller and not quite as sharp edges or outward angles. And looks like 60% for the case back. So it's good. We're starting to come out with more things like that. So, And then the 373 is our 44GS. That's one of our most complex case designs because it's so flat and so faceted. So one of the, here's an example of SPGA 201. Like I said, same case design as the snowflake, just in stainless steel. Another cool one is the SPGC 201. So this is our sport chronograph that is still kind of like the classic case design of Grand Seiko, but it has this amazing dial finish. And this is a very complex movement, over 400 components, which you're getting into like grand complication territory at over 400 components. So this particular dial organizes basically everything for the chronograph feature in tempered blue hands and to the right side of the dial. This way it's nice, neat, organized, and easy to read.
We have one of these as well. So I think that, there's a lot going on, obviously, with the GMT function on top of the chrono, but I don't think it's too thick. And the dial, while it is showing a lot, I don't think it's too busy. There's no overlap there, and still very legible. Yeah.
I have the black dial version of this watch in my collection. I wear it frequently, and I love it. And I especially, no one uses a chronograph really. I mean, actually, one of your guys' customers I know only buys chronographs, and he uses them. I don't use them. I use them for fun, and this is just the way it is. But when it comes to functionality of this thing, it's amazing. And the way you use the pusher, it's made to be kind of like a camera shutter, right, or an digital camera. You depress to get the watch in focus, let's say, right? Depress it halfway, and while you're bracing for the event to start, and as soon as you hear the gun go off to start the race, click, right? And because we use a column wheel and a vertical clutch engagement, you have this very precise click. Without looking at the watch that you've started, stopped, or reset the stopwatch. That's one of the best feelings. I encourage you to check these out. They are really, really something special. And like I said, very complex with the chronograph, the GMT, the power reserve indicator, puts it at over 400 components. And the inspiration actually for the design of the pushers and the feel actually of the pushers comes from a stopwatch we made for the 1964 Tokyo Olympics. And that led to the influence of this design. And even though the pushers look quite large on this, I assure you they do not. I work on my computer all the time. They do not dig into my wrist at all, which I think is great. So,
and they're screw down as well.
They're screw down. I've actually taken mine into the ocean, relatively recently. And
what is the water resistance?
100 meters.
Nice.
So, and
again, a lot of watch for $200.
Yeah, at 8,200. I mean, and this is one of the favorites. When you go to the Shinshu watch studio in central Japan, a lot of the senior watchmakers are wearing one of those, either the silk sunray or the black dial, just based on the fact that it's really an ultra performance watch. And then lastly, we have one of our newer releases. It's actually the same design that we've had in the collection for a number of years now, but we introduced a new quartz caliber this year that has an independent adjust hour hand feature. And that was a really challenging thing for us to do because our quartz watches have an instantaneous date. No other quartz watch in the world has an instantaneous date that works like a mechanical instantaneous date. So to add the jump hour feature was a really nice touch, but we needed to make sure we made it durable. And through modern manufacturing techniques, we're able to finally achieve our goal. And so we introduced recently the SBGP001, which is our quartz 44GS with the silk sunray dial. And now it has instantaneous date plus independent adjust hour hand. It's accurate within 10 seconds a year. So if it's daylight savings or you're traveling, you can change the hour hand by itself without stopping its ultra accurate time.
And you can go both backwards and forwards.
Correct. And it's safe to change the date that way too, by the way. A lot of people I know get nervous if you're wanting to change, because you have to change the date through jumping the hour hand. You can go forward or backwards with our watches, whether it's a GMT in quartz, spring drive, or high beat or traditional mechanical. So always keep that in mind. All right. This is an interesting one. This particular dial seems lackluster maybe compared to some of the textured dials that we have. Its ultimate goal is functionality, and this is a completely black matte dial that is done through essentially a lacquering process, but the type of painting process. So this is essentially reflecting no light. It's very minimal amounts of light that it's reflecting. So this way there's very stark contrast to the hour markers, to the hands, and we use it a lot in our sports collection because of the addition of lume, right? You don't see this in many of our models unless they're in the sports collection, is luminous paint. Now we have our own proprietary material we call Lumibright, which has an amazing duration and very strong luminous paint, but in Grand Seiko it's not too common to see because we have such faceted hands. They reflect the light really well. They're easy to read in low light settings even without lume. But for this particular model, the Kiribi, basically ceremony, right, is the inspiration, serving for the inspiration for this. So essentially what the Kiribi ceremony is when basically if you were going on a journey in Japan, and let's say back in the olden days, if you were going on a journey, they would take a flint to stone and create sparks, and the sparks would be cast upon your back as you're leaving, which would be essentially a sign of good fortune or wishing you well-being on this trip. And so this is significant in our GMT watch, the red creating that spark, also that luminous material creating that spark for the Kiribi ceremony. So with that said, this uses that very black matte dial in our sport collection, as well as our Grand Seiko diver. So
we have one of the GMT spring drive pieces here that we can show everybody. So this one doesn't have an exhibition case back, but bidirectional bezel. And I like, I'm a sucker for the black and red combos. Grand Seiko always has the great GMT combos, whether it be, the peacock with the green and yellow, or the maroon and yellow, or, black and red in this instance. So again, $5,800, fantastic value.
One thing I neglected, I should bring up about that watch first and foremost, is it has a sapphire crystal bezel that's dual curve. And so the insert is sapphire, and the numbers underneath glow as well. So the hands, the markers, and the luminous bezel glow in the dark with our Lumibright material. And so for the diver has the same black matte dial and completely different indices and hands. The hands on this are actually made of titanium, so we can make them bigger, right, without increasing the weight. So we want to have these huge, easy to read hands for our diver. This is made to be a practical recreational diver, right? It's something that's very easy to wear even when you're not diving, because most people, just like a chronograph, most people aren't really going diving. Maybe they'll take it in the pool, but this recreational diver is kind of for the office during the day, and then if you jump in the pool at night, it's ready to go. So what's interesting about this too is the diver we measure is 44 millimeters, and I want you to remember that the crown protector is included in that measurement. If you were to measure it without the crown protector, it's a little over 41 millimeters. So it's not as bad as it sounds in its dimensions.
Yeah,
a lot of people would love us to
I have a
see it.
smaller wrist, and I could definitely pull this off. I'd say I'm 6 3/4 inches, and I think I could pull this.
Oh yeah, and then the lug length on it's under 50. It's I think 48 millimeters lug to lug length, or right around there, maybe 49. It's a very, very good size. The crown protector, like I said, makes it, the full length of the case from widest point to widest point is going to be 44. But the crown protector, most of the time you're not counting the crown protector. We do as a manufacturer. So just always important to keep in mind. Looks like we got another survey. What do you prefer, limited or continuous? Ooh, that's tough. We do so many good, unusual colors, like you're saying, the peacock and stuff like that.
What's nice about your continuous production models, though, is they're not overproduced. Whereas a lot of other brands, there's an excess supply. I don't think that's ever really the case when it comes to Grand Seiko, which is nice. So I would maybe vote differently with another brand, or at least be emphatic with my decision. But I'd have to think a little more with Grand Seiko. I mean, you guys make incredible limited editions, so that might make me go there. But then snowflake, you name it, for continuous production pieces, which are not still easily attainable or everywhere. So
this is true. Yeah, it's so I was telling you guys, Shizukuishi has about 20 watchmakers, right, roughly. Same thing at our Shinshu studio, where we make spring drive and quartz. So George, if I had to pick, and this is the way I am, usually I go continuous production. I have the snowflake, I have the 203, I have the chrono.
I'm surprised by that, by those results there.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Listen, that's good news.
But, I think that's a good thing. It shows the core of the brand is strong.
Yeah.
Amongst consumers.
So thank you all. We'd love to hear that.
Do you publicize your annual production?
We do not. But it's I mean, you can kind of guesstimate, but based on the fact we have roughly 40 watchmakers, that's not a lot for Grand Seiko. You can just looking at that alone, it's not a very high volume. Volume is not our strong suit.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Luxury is scarcity.
Yeah, this is true. We want to do it right, and this is very important for our brand. All right, so now we're going to start jumping. What I just walked you through is some of kind of the core products of the lineup. Now we're going to start to get into more ornate things, very unique and unusual dial techniques, and I'm going to start with Urushi lacquer. So Urushi lacquer, it's not the first time anyone's done in watchmaking, let alone Japanese watchmaking or Swiss watchmaking. It doesn't matter. A lot of people love Urushi lacquer, right? Even though it's a Japanese thing, it's been used in the industry globally, we'll say. So for Grand Seiko, this is the first time we've ever done Urushi lacquer in our lineup. This was introduced starting in 2019 through Artisan Ishitomura. So he's a renowned artist in Japan. There are guys he does a lot of work for Sailor Pen, as an example. Some really amazing pens for Sailor, by the way. Some of these can cost tens of thousands of dollars, just to give you an idea, some of the pens he's made. So he's also responsible for the Curator Fugaku tourbillon, which we introduced in 2016, which was 460,000 US dollars. So, this guy's a very talented artist. He was responsible for all the Urushi and Maki lacquer utilized on that piece. And now he's finally getting to work on Grand Seiko. It wouldn't be Grand Seiko if it wasn't special and unique. So one of the first things I want to talk about in his dial making for us, right? The Urushi lacquer is native to Japan, and a lot of people don't know this, but Japanese Urushi lacquer, where the lacquer is actually harvested in Japan, is ultra rare. We're talking probably less than 20% of Japanese lacquerware, as an example, is going to be actually from Japan. Most of the time, they have to outsource for it because it's a relatively scarce item. So for Grand Seiko, we actually select a locally grown Urushi lacquer tree. So this is Urushi lacquer from the town of Joboji, which neighbors Shizukuishi. So I'm going to throw a lot of hard to remember Japanese names around tonight. Don't worry, this is my job to remember these things, not yours. But so this lacquer comes from Joboji, which is a neighboring town of our studio, which makes it very special. Also very costly, but at the same time, it's very unique. And so Mr. Tamura, he starts off the dial, he'll either have a ground dial or he uses, for one of the models, and I'll show you this amber color model, has the ridges of Mount Iwate texture. But what makes it different is this dial is not flat, it's curved. And to apply the texture to a curved dial is a much more challenging process. We actually have to apply the texture first and then curve the dial afterwards. And then he'll apply a golden powder on top of the dial base for the Mount Iwate one. So on top of that, he does his what they call Suki Urushi technique, which is a translucent lacquer. So after the lacquer has been cured, there's nothing added. This is the natural color of the lacquer, of the sap, essentially, after it's been cured. So it's this kind of orangish, reddish, we call amber shade. And it's really something beautiful and spectacular. And so Mr. Tamura has to apply a thin coat and then let it harden and cure. Then he polishes. And then he does that process again and again and again and again. So for Mr. Tamura, the dial not being flat makes it more challenging to polish, because if it were a flat surface, you can feel the consistency really well. In this particular instance, because it's curved and because there's very, very minimal tolerances between the dial being curved and the inside of the sapphire crystal being curved, he has to be very, very precise in polishing to make sure that it's completely even across this domed surface.
Let's check in with our man Sunflowerman real quickly here as he
please do. I want to see.
Darkens the dial on the SPGA 429 here. Can we?
Yeah. Well, I'll talk a little bit about technique as well, since technique is a big part of the conversation here. I've actually been really engrossed, Joe, with the processes for the dials. Honestly, that baby blue, I'm thinking about trying to paint that baby blue, and I would have a nightmare getting so little pigment on the paper. Like, I would hate myself trying to match that color. It's so delicate. I know it's a different process than using watercolor or acrylic to get that, but very beautiful. But what I'm doing here, I've been working with a India ink. So it's a permanent water-based ink, but it dries very quickly. So when I'm doing a live event like this, and actually I'm gonna try and get you a little bit closer. When I'm doing a live event like this, it actually helps to have a fast dry medium like the Black India ink. So I've been using that for the base of the entire painting. So we only had an hour and a half, where something like the 427, I spent about 12 to 14 hours completing. So I was just layering thin amounts of watercolor. You could see the entire piece here had at least one layer of the India ink. Sometimes I wash it down so it's very thin. Sometimes I lay it on so it's nice and black. And now I'm beginning to lay the watercolor over top. I won't add as much color around during this live, but I'll focus mostly on the style upcoming. As this dries, you can see some warping happening in the paper. I have tape around the edges of the paper because as the pulp dries, it wants to kind of keep this warped shape, but the paper forces it to pull back to the way it was before I wet it. Yeah, so then we'll go on with some white gouache, which is not technically watercolor, but it'll be what pulls out all of our bright white highlights on the watch.
Incredible. You're a very talented man, that's for sure.
Well, that's what I like to hear. You know, that's what I was hoping to get from this video. So I think I'm done now. I got my compliments. We're good to go.
You'll be getting
I'll make sure you have, you know, our address, and you just make sure, you know, care of George Mayer when you send that.
Right, yeah. I know who to send it to. And if at any point, if there are any questions about this process, I am open to discussing. I like talking about the work that I do. I can talk too much. We can go in a lot of different directions. Yeah, so if there are any questions at any point, just throw them out at me.
Cool. Yeah, I think we'll have go back to Joe, and then if people want to brainstorm questions, we'll you know, we can fire away at both Joe and Sunflowerman at the end during the Q&A sessions.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So you learned a little bit about art and art. This is really what we have. So from painting on canvas to painting on dials, this is a perfect tie-in. Great timing, George. Thank you. So for this particular dial, like I said, the texture can be seen through this translucent lacquer. It's got this amber color, which is the natural color of the lacquer. And locally grown, of course, is a really cool aspect as well. So for the numbers and the GS logo and all the markers, maki lacquer is utilized, and it's a three-dimensional lacquer, so they call taka maki. So this is, again, all done by the skilled hands of Ishitomura. So we have the amber dial that you just saw was SBGK002, and then this is SBGK004. Both utilize our new 9S63 caliber, which has power reserve indicator at the 3 o'clock position and small seconds for the first time ever on a time-only Grand Seiko, more or less, that you'll ever see. So this particular design has the power reserve and the small seconds. We've also just recently introduced. Oh,
quickly, we have that.
Sorry, George, please.
So might as well show our viewers here. So exhibition case back showing the manual movement. There we go.
So this is a manual wind with 3-day power reserve, just so everyone's aware of what's inside. Of course, all in-house manufactured, and utilizes a new case design. We actually developed a new version of Zaratsu polishing for. So this is a very special case design. We also developed a new sapphire crystal for, and this is one of the most expensive and curved crystals that you've seen. It's kind of like a combination between a box-shaped sapphire crystal and a very, very dramatically curved dual curve sapphire crystal. It's insane that this does not distort the dial. It does not bubble or you know, warp the dial in any way, despite its very heavily curved shape. So this SBGK004 and newly introduced SBGW262 are both using jet black Joboji Urushi. So it's, again, from the same region of Japan. However, it's not the translucent lacquer like we saw in the amber color. This, they add iron to create this jet inky black color. And the taka maki that I was describing before is executed with either 24 karat gold powder mixed in with the lacquer or platinum powder. So this is done, the amber color one has just platinum powder, where this is a combination of 24 karat gold or platinum powder. And again, all hand painted, which is pretty remarkable. So the SBGK002 and the SBGK004 are limited editions of only 150 pieces each worldwide. Right? And of course, most of those stayed in Japan. The recently introduced SBGW262 is going to be a continuing model. However, these are going to be insanely small production quantities. these. So just keep that in mind. It's not going to be a very readily available watch, but this is because these are handcrafted dials by one sole artisan. So it's always very important to remember that. That's why you could only make 150 each of the 9S63, the SBGK models. All right, we just keep going higher and higher in price. I like to start low and kind of build my way up as we go through. So now we're getting into the micro artist studio. So this is another studio that is only about roughly 10 craftsmen and women who are responsible for everything in the production of their watches, and everything done traditionally by hand. These are real craftsmen. They take so much time and so much care in the manufacturing of these watches. Everything is hand polished. The beveling has been compared to Philippe Dufour and many other greats in the watch industry. Actually, the artisans who do the beveling studied under Dufour. They learned from the greatest, right? So this is, this is a really cool, unique attribute, a unique story that you can, probably Google and find a bit more about. But the Micro Artist Studio is a very special place, and they do some amazing movement finishing. But they also make some very incredible dials. So starting with our 8-day power reserve spring drive, right? This is actually the most complex dial set that we have made in Grand Seiko, and especially the most complex textured dial that we've made in Grand Seiko thus far. So it started when we introduced the 8-day in 2016. We introduced what we call the diamond dust dial. And no, we do not use any diamond in this particular model. It's actually paying tribute to central Japan again, in Shinshu, where they make the watch. It gets so cold there. And diamond dust is a natural occurring phenomenon where low-lying clouds freeze and little particles of ice kind of dance in the air. And so the diamond dust dial is paying tribute to this natural phenomenon. And the manufacturing of this dial is insanely complex. So if you think about all the processes that go into the champagne, that go into the snowflake, this is next level, many times over. So what separates this, it is a texture dial. It's a much more refined pattern than you would find on the snowflake as an example. However, a lot more layers, right? Lots more layers, not just electroplating, but also painting techniques as well, and special techniques that allow this particular dial to reflect light at multiple angles, right? That's one thing that we cannot typically not do with a textured dial, is have light reflect different ways. It always kind of goes in the same direction. And with the diamond dust dial, it almost has the effect of a disco ball, right? When you look at it, it shimmers like a diamond, right? And it's these little tiny hidden grooves in the dial that reflect light at multiple angles, and it's really, really eye-catching. So obviously more silver and white tones are utilized on the diamond dust dial. And then in 2018, we introduced the Stardust style, which is combining black and various golds. So the rose gold model is utilizing the Stardust style. The Platinum 950 model is utilizing the Diamond Dust style. Now, these movements are amazing. I would love to talk about the movements that are inside them all day. We could do a 2-hour seminar just on the movements of the 8 days, but we're here to talk about dials today. And I've got a few more in store for you. So not too much.
Power reserve on the back of those pieces. You're not going to get in the way of those dials. That's for sure.
Correct. Yeah. So these are completely uninterrupted, no date, power reserves on the back. Another cool feature too is these have higher accuracy than regular spring drive at 10 seconds per month, as opposed to 15, which is the normal. And that comes through a specially selected oscillator. And then these also have an independent adjust hour hand. So you can jump the hour hand only forward. You don't need to go forward or backward since there's no date, but it only jumps forward. So everyone knows. It's a cool feature. All right. And then last year we introduced in our new Elegance case design, that model we call SBGZ003. Not many people are very familiar with the story behind this watch yet, but I will certainly get into it a little. So looking at this a little more closely, it's inspired by sparkling snow, known in Japanese as kirayuki. So sparkling snow. This is one of the finest dial textures that we have done yet to date, right? So it is achieved by press patterning, but again, this is a curved dial, so we have to consider the additional steps involved. The markers that are not applied, as well as the Grand Seiko logo, spring drive logo, the little star at the 6, and everything, there's nothing printed on this dial. Everything is carved into the dial with perfection. You can look at this under a loop, and even the beveling on the GS logo is just amazing. The quality of craftsmanship that goes into the dial on this is next level. And we achieve this sparkling pattern on this Kirayuki, or this sparkling snow, through essentially a special abrasive technique. So it's combining, you know, the press patterning with the electroplating processes, along with some special burnishing techniques to get this really beautiful but ultra fine dial. So this is what you would see essentially looking at the dial, these fields of snow. I don't know if you have noticed, but Grand Seiko is very heavily inspired by the snow, especially our spring drive models. This is because in Nagano Prefecture, where we make them, you know, it's very mountainous. It's very central Japan, and the snowfall there is real light and airy, and you know, it's perfect powder snow, right? They actually hosted the 1998 Winter Olympics there as an example, right? This is a great place to go skiing, snowboarding, all that good stuff, and one of the most popular places in Japan to do so. But this is a huge influence on why the snow is such a special time of year in Nagano. So, and hence why a lot of our watches are inspired by the winter. All right, and it wouldn't be fun unless I threw probably the most renowned dial out there, right? I know everyone wants to talk about this dial. Curator technically is only sold in Japan, or is only officially sold and marketed in Japan. So it is a Japanese domestic brand. It is not marketed outside of Japan, the Japanese market. However, every once in a while, you get to see one. There are very few around. Same for the 8 days that you just saw, and the new Kirayuki model. Those models are incredibly rare, just as rare as the Curator, if not more so. So, you know, all of them, though, are just extremely small quantities of production. So please keep that in mind. But we wanted to talk about cool dials in Grand Seiko today. And even though Curator is not Grand Seiko, we're still part of the same family. So I thought I'd throw this in here, end this on a fun note. So the GBLT 999 is the platinum version. The 998 is the newer rose gold version. We call this the H. It's pronounced like the letter H. H-E is also another way you can pronounce it. H in Japanese means wisdom, right? And this is essentially, without saying it officially, you know, it's kind of like a tribute to Dufour's simplicity, right? The H, the original one from 2008, the dial was made by Noritake Porcelain and had a power reserve indicator near the 10 o'clock position, had a subtle 247 painted in enamel on top of the porcelain in white. So it was very faint. And we wanted to exceed the quality of the 2008 H1. So in 2014, we introduced the Platinum H2. The dial no longer comes from Noritake. The dial base of porcelain is 100% pure aluminum porcelain and is made in Nagano. The dial is completely hand-painted by one artisan in our studio. His job is to paint these dials. He trained and he studied and trained for over 3 years to learn this technique. Right? This is a very high skill that's required of this craftsman. So this is a very special dial in many ways, but I think it's most amazing that people really don't believe that it's hand painted. They think this is just printed on the dial, like you would commonly find in watchmaking. And I'm excited to say that I brought some proof today, not just this picture, but a little bit of video. So the artisan mixes his own paint special every day for these dials, right? And you're going to see in a moment, this is a very delicate process. He hand selects every single brush that he uses in this process He can make a maximum of 1 dial per day, even though he doesn't make a dial every day because there's not that many H2s being made. But I'm going to show you a video I took at the Micro Artist Studio, where there you can see in the upper left-hand side the enamel glaze paint that he has prepared in the morning. He is now painting on the 6 o'clock marker. I'm going to tell you when he starts painting. And you're going to be very surprised. You're going to think that the video is frozen. Now he starts painting right now. This is not slow motion. This is not frozen. This is how slow and how steady this craftsman does his job. I've never seen anyone, and keep in mind, my camera is right over his shoulder right now. It's like I'm not even there.
Incredible. You dropped the mic at the end there with that Ichi. Let me tell you. Yeah, no, it's an unbelievable piece. You never see him. I thought somebody made a comment that was super funny, an analogy. That was great. But Joe, thank you so much for that. You're a wealth of knowledge. Every time I hear you speak, I learn more, and incredibly educational and informative. I hope everyone else enjoyed it as much as I did. Sunflowerman, let's check in with you before we go to Q&A. How you make it out over there?
Oh, we're doing well. We are doing
and that is my
very
presentation
well.
on
Trying
Grand
to be up here
Seiko
on
dials.
the screen. I don't know how well everybody can see
And
it.
now-
We're adding in a lot of the finer details now. The bright
No,
lights are coming
everyone loves it
to,
so much. I
make
figured
all
why
the
not?
indices pop. We have the texture on the dial, that vertical striping that you see on the dial. I don't know if you can see it. I'll pull this off the tripod. See if we can get a closer look here. So we're getting those textures going on.
You got the
GS
finish
is going to
there.
have that more of that gold that you see on the actual dial, but I'm starting with a black base and I'll overlay with a yellow gouache. Put you back up here. It's got a sort of patinaed look all the way around, which is one of the techniques. I love vintage style. Sometimes I'm a fashion guy as well. A lot of times my style is a little more like 1930s, 1940s. So given this patina look is kind of that throwback, but it also is great for doing a live painting because you can give an ambiance right away and then dig into the details to finish up. So that's where we're at right now.
And how long have you been doing this? Just to let all of our viewers know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, here's what I like to tell people. I was born with a pencil in my hand. I don't know if it was given to me or if I had it in the womb, but I was born with it. But I've been painting on and off since high school. I've been drawing my entire life. I fell in love with watches probably, 8 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that. And yeah, so I've been painting fashion and watches for nearly a decade, which sounds crazy to me, but that's been going on.
Nice. We're going to have to get you an Ichi dial one day to see if you could perform under pressure.
Oh, you know what? I don't know how much time we have for anecdotes, but I played a lot of sports in high school, and I played a lot. In basketball, I would find this one spot on the court, wide open, shoot, air ball. Next time down the court, same spot, shoot, air ball. In practice, this never happened. Never. But during a game, 4 times, one game, same spot, wide open, just completely embarrassed myself. But when it comes to painting live, oh, I'm on. Put me under pressure. We'll make it happen.
Awesome. Maybe one day. We'll see.
Right.
So we hope everybody enjoyed this. Let's open it up now for some Q&A. As an attendee, you have the ability to virtually raise your hand by clicking the raise hand feature along the bottom of your screen. From there, we will call on you and you will be unmuted to ask your question. If you're feeling camera or audio shy, you can type your question using the Q&A box, also located at the bottom of the screen. I see we have some questions there already, which we can start with a couple of those. And we'll get to as many questions as we can. And if we don't get to yours tonight, not to worry. Please email the question to rsvp@watchbox.com, and we'll get back to you. The first one we'll start with before calling on people, I thought it was a great question. It caught me when I was scrolling through them. Are there any plans, Joe, to start making salmon dials? That's been hot of late. You have, Patek Philippe making one. A. Langensohn is, it's dials, right? This is the talk of tonight. So that was a great question, I thought.
I agree. It is a great question, and I'll be perfectly frank. Unfortunately, I won't be able to divulge any information about future product through the Q&A. However, I'm always happy to entertain. And in reality, I think we already addressed the salmon dial with our own response. And that response would be the Sakura dial or the cherry blossoms dial in the SPGA 413 or the Shunbun. So I would say that's the closest that I would guess that we would do.
Got it. Pull up another one here from our Q&A that have come in. Do you ever carve out a micro studio where the underlying metal is another color like copper on a diamond dial?
I'm sorry, if you could repeat that one more time.
So I'm from Patrick Zarabecki. Do you ever carve out an underlying metal, another color like copper on a diamond dial? I'm not sure if I entirely understand the question.
I think in using multiple layers, maybe he's asking if like the bottom line layer would be like copper or some underlying layer might be copper. And no, as of yet, I have not seen anything of that nature. I've seen everything coming out of the micro artist studio and nothing along those lines yet.
Here's a good one, I think. Will Grand Seiko produce a diver smaller than 41 millimeters?
Again, I can't speak for the future of what may be released. I think that Grand Seiko, the manufacturer, the studios paid good attention to what demand is. I can't say for sure, but yeah, I would say that there are restrictions in terms of our current movement sizes. So that's something to consider as well. With the movement size, like spring drive diver right now, the movement diameter keeps it, really, close to 40, 41 would be like the smallest size that we're using. 39, but there's no crown protector and stuff like that is the smallest case size that we have for a 9R65 spring drive caliber as of today. So, there are limitations due to the movement. And keep in mind, just the time only, with power reserve spring drive, the 9R65, like in the snowflake or in the diver, is over 275 components in that movement. That's a lot more than most automatics. So we got to be, we got to try and be conservative, but we also have to be cautious of all those components. So hopefully we can manage 50 producing size.
Awesome. Thank you for that thorough answer. All right, Mohammed, we're going to unmute you so you can ask your question verbally.
Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, Mohammed.
Hey, what's up, Joe? I've been watching you a lot, man. Thank you so much. I'm a big Grand Seiko fan and have a few in my collection. Couple questions.
Awesome.
First question is, on all your divers, you guys don't use ceramic bezels, even though there are ceramic bezels on. I have a GMT that has a ceramic bezel. I have the 229, the SPGA 229, and you just came out with the 3 brand new GMTs. The green on green, the blue on blue, and the black on black, all with ceramic bezels. Why can't you guys use those ceramic bezels on the divers as well to compete with all the other brands that make divers with ceramic bezels?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It makes absolute sense. The one thing I will say is that if you notice what we've been doing with the ceramic are full ceramic bezels, not inserts, right? Because with the diver bezel, you need to have a metal backing. When you get into the inserts, you're making them dramatically thinner. And a part of a dive watch, and you got to keep in mind, Grand Seiko is made to be a very practical watch. So if you buy a dive watch, we assume you're going to take it diving, right? And the functionality of a dive bezel is lost if you manage to break that ceramic. That's the thing that I think holds back utilizing ceramic as an insert for a dive watch specifically. Is the fact that you could fracture it, if you bump your wrist off of a rock while you're diving, and then the bezel is lost and the functionality of it is lost, which, granted, everyone has a dive computer on their wrist nowadays anyways. But, you know, the watch is built with a purpose. And I think that as of today, they haven't pushed forward with ceramic insert, but you're seeing more use of ceramic for full, thicker ceramic bezels, which are more durable, basically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then my next question, I'm pretty sure you can't answer, but I'm going to try anyway.
It's okay.
It's 60th anniversary, and the big thing with the 60th anniversary have been the two brand new movements, the high beat and the 9RA5 for the diver that you guys introduced. I've seen a lot of pictures online with the 9RA2 with a clear case back, and it has the power reserve on the back. It looked like a real picture. It didn't look like a prototype. Are you guys still going to introduce like more watches for the 60th anniversary, or is that like a secret that wasn't supposed to be leaked? Or, you know what I'm talking about? The 9RA.
That's a good question. I have no idea what you're talking about, so I'm just gonna have to guess. You know, that what you saw was what you saw, but
Mohammed, you might be onto
I
something.
don't know.
That was a beautiful picture. It's all over the net. People are going crazy over the forums, and there's no information on what it is.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to Google it, I guess.
Yeah, before we have to cut this and all go dark, let's go on to our next question. Mohammed.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
Two good ones.
Thank you,
One
Mohammed.
maybe a little bit too good. Thanks, Mohammed.
Bye-bye.
Ryan Hewlett, or Hewlett, I apologize if I'm pronouncing it improperly, has a great question, I think. Would Grand Seiko ever entertain a world time watch? You know, could there be a world time dial? Obviously, you have to have the movement first, but would be pretty cool. I'm envisioning it right now, you know, a globe or something of the sort, you know, for, you know, 24 time zones. Difficult to make, you know, because again, you have a lot going on, a lot of, you know, there needs to be 24 different cities if you're going to do a world time. What are your thoughts there?
I think that if it can be done practically, I think it's something that they would entertain. I think that you know, when we talk about Grand Seiko, I always, in the back of my mind, I always think the same thing, right? Is it practical? Is it legible? Is it going to maintain high accuracy? You know, all of the things that make Grand Seiko kind of what it is, right? It was made to be the best practical watch in the world when it started, and that philosophy still stays true today. So accuracy, legibility, durability, if any of those things are compromised, probably won't happen. If it could be done in a practical manner where it's legible, I think legibility would be the biggest restriction with a world time, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, I've never seen a cluttered Grand Seiko dial, so I'm
Closest
sure that you would.
Chrono.
Right, which I think is fine still.
Yeah, that's for sure.
A great question was, how would you compare lacquer to enamel, and how do they age differently? But that's a good question.
That's tough too, because, you know, I mean, they both kind of age in their own respects, and in all honesty, you know, the Urushi lacquer that you're seeing in this Grand Seiko, I mean, I've got no personal experience with over decades and decades. You know, this is a very high grade Japanese Urushi lacquer. So I don't know how it ages over time in comparison to seeing like vintage enamel dials or other types of lacquer. So, you know, enamel is a great material. When we're talking about like the Curator, it's porcelain, and it's very, very pure white, and it's going to retain that white, you know, that white style, that white shade for a very long time. And for the Urushi lacquer that we're using in Grand Seiko, again, longevity is a big part of it. So if it changes over time too much, we're not going to use it in the brand. So I'm confident that the Urushi that we're utilizing, especially since like the black one is using iron to create the color, that it's not going to discolor over time as you would see as in some other types of lacquer.
So before we check in with Sunflowerman, we have one more good one here from Jerry On. Can you explain how Grand Seiko comes up with a reference number? For an example, what's the difference between SBGA and SBGK? What do SBGA or K mean?
Yep, that's a tough one. I can explain it. I mean, I understand it, but I've been just dealing with them so long that it's like ingrained into my head. So like SBG is essentially referencing a men's Grand Seiko, right? For the most part, up until this year, that's how it's been. So SBG, then the next letter is going to be the caliber. So A is for 9R65. It doesn't have any like correlation to it necessarily, but the A is 9R65. E is 9R66. C is 9R86 chronograph. You know, so there's a rhyme and reason to it. It's just not like an easy mnemonic device necessarily. You know, and it's not something that you can, you know, pick up very quickly. The number sequence is basically in what order they were produced or conceived. So SBGA 001 would have been the first 9R65 spring drive. Now we've changed the dial on it, so it's now SBGA 201 is the first Grand Seiko spring drive, but with the Grand Seiko logo only in the 12 o'clock position. The SBGA 001 had Seiko at the top and then Grand Seiko at 6 o'clock. So hopefully that makes sense. And it's always odd numbers for silver tone metals, whether it's steel, titanium, or platinum, or white gold, and then even numbers for yellow or rose gold. There's a rhyme and reason.
Good stuff.
Hopefully
so there's been a couple questions about the Kirazuri limited edition dials. Any comment on?
Not the steel. Those are long gone. No, what? I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Let's see here. I guess, you know, one person's just asking, you know, can you address the future of it? Is there a future?
Not that I'm aware of, sadly.
Got it.
Yeah, that was, you know, 558, and that was the magic number, and they went quickly. The you know, the cool thing, you know, the other two, the rose gold model and the platinum model, we did the 9R15 caliber, which is a much smaller scale production caliber. So you know, those we did 50 and 20, or doing 50, 20 pieces. Those have the Kirazuri dial. So the rose gold one is Kirazuri in a different tone than you saw with the steel, but the Kirazuri in platinum is actually a combination of Kirazuri and the 8-day diamond dust type finishing. You get the reflecting light at different angles, which is really neat. So if you ever get
one of my favorite Grand Seiko dials is the SBGH 269. It's almost like this red bark looking like dial. Can you talk about that, the whole process behind that?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, you know, it's a striping pattern. So similar to what you would see like on movement finishing, right? And the concept behind it is the red autumn leaves reflecting in an Urushi lacquer floor in a traditional Japanese home, which is also actually inspired in Kyoto. So you know, it's really a beautiful dial, really well executed, and the case on that too is something really special too that we've only done in a total 2 steel models, a yellow gold model, and in platinum model. Those were from 2018, so 3 of those were from 2018. But yeah, we've never done a dial like the red one, like the 269 before, and I'd be surprised if we saw one anytime soon, but very cool dial.
Yeah, that one's awesome. That's one of my favorites. So got two really good questions here for you. So you talk about how Grand Seiko is vertically integrated. Wesley has a great question. Does it go all the way down to refining the raw materials?
In terms of, so we have special compositions for some of our metals and raw materials. So yes, there is certainly that approach. Like you know, we have our own proprietary alloys for our springs and stuff like that. In terms of like the stainless steel, you know, the 316L stainless steel, no, but you know, we do it. Just it depends on what you're talking about. So there's a pretty wide variety there. But yes, we have some of that capability as well.
Okay, here's one for you, which I'm sure you can answer as you're a collector yourself. If you're looking to form a 4-watch Grand Seiko only collection, which models do you seek out and why?
That's the hardest question I think I've had. I think I've already answered most of it. I mean, what I have is pretty good. I would say Snowflake, SBGJ 203, the Mantiwate. So that way you have, one with white and blue, one with the black and red. I think you need to have a 9F Quartz in there. I think that right now, I'd say the Tough Quartz limited edition with the blue ceramic bezel for the 60th anniversary is awesome. Like, I love that case design. I love the fact that it's, that it's quartz with the independent and just hour hand, and it's got a ceramic bezel with a tall sapphire crystal that sits a little bit above. So basically anything you bump into is pretty scratch resistant. So it goes along well with the Tough name. And then lastly would be a masterpiece. For me, the 8 Day is number one. That's like the pinnacle of Grand Seiko in terms of watchmaking, finishing, engineering, amazing engineering behind the 8 Day. So if I had my choice, I think those four would keep me happy. If I had to get rid of the masterpiece, then maybe I would add the SPGW 231, the manual one.
Let's check in on our man, Sunflowerman. We have a question for him too from Mohammed. Sunflowerman, what's your thought process to decide your first brush stroke?
Ooh, that's great. With watches, I've painted hundreds of them by now. I always start with, depending on the composition. If it's just a straight up watch portrait and it's just the watch on the page, it'll be a flat circle. And I'll draw that out first. So my first pencil mark is always that circle of the bezel, even if the case shape is not a circle, even if it's elongated, if it's an oval, I always start with a circle. For whatever reason, that is the base shape for a watch. Even if it's a square watch, I'm starting with a circle. It doesn't really even matter. It kind of sets the tone for the entire process. When it comes to the brushwork, I'm going to start with the darkest tone probably on the bezel. So like right along here, all along this left edge, I'm going to start with the darkest brush stroke first, lay in all the midtones, and go to the highlights.
Looking good. You're making progress there.
Oh yeah, we are. Ooh, since we're paying attention, I'll go ahead and do a little bit of color here. Put the yellow on the GS. See if we can all see that.
Very cool. In the meantime, while you're doing that, we have a hand raised. We're gonna call on a longtime customer of ours, a very loyal customer, local to us, David Ettinger. David.
Hello, George. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, my friend?
Well, the drawing looks magnificent. My dog, like your dog, is barking in the background, so sorry for the background noise. And obviously, Grand Seiko has made a fantastic entry into the United States and is continuing to do amazing things. Where do you guys see the manufacturer going? More with high-end precious metal manual wind movements, or the mainstream price range of where their target zone is?
It's a very good question.
That's a great question, David. I really appreciate that question, actually, because it's something that I think more people should kind of understand. And David, nice to meet you, by the way. Sorry I didn't
Thank you, Joe.
say that first and foremost, but hope to meet you in person one day when I make it back out there. But I would say that really right now, and since we announced the brand is becoming an independent brand in 2017, that the focus is on diversity. So we want to have the core lineup. We have a lot of stuff right now in that kind of key price point, the $6,000-ish range.
Right.
So little by little every year, we're introducing more high-end pieces, stuff. Because we had this great collection starting from 2,200 going up to about 15,000.
Right.
And then after 15,000, it would jump to 59,000.
Right.
And
Gold,
there was
platinum,
nothing in between.
Yeah.
Exactly. The 8 days, you know, is like you're looking at the sports lineup, and then all of a sudden you're at the 8 day, and you're like, okay, that's a big price jump.
Yeah.
Is there anything in between? And so that's kind of been
I don't look at the price.
a little bit of a
The
focus.
price jump. I mean, that's your marketing stuff, but what you're doing is great. I mean, I just got a Godzilla, so
Oh, congratulations! I'm very
very
jealous.
cool.
I should have added that in my
Yeah,
course.
just and you know, my wife bought me a few years ago a high beat special at the New York boutique when they just opened, and it was number 100
Yeah,
at
that's in 2014.
yeah, it was a limited of 300. It was number 100, which was a cool number, and it was my birthday, and it was my first intro to such a high end movement.
Yeah, that's the only time we ever made that case in stainless steel, by the way.
Exactly, that's what I got, a stainless steel, and it was it's cool.
Yeah, that's an amazing
It's
piece.
cool.
The dial pattern's amazing. So congratulations.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are a lot of people jealous of you, of not just of the Godzilla, but if you know that piece, you know, that's a really good one.
Yeah,
And I don't even
it's
can't
cool.
even think of a
It's cool.
special that we've done in steel relatively recently. Titanium and ceramics, yes, but not a special adjustment on a steel model at one time.
I have to hang up because my dog's going to go crazy in 2 seconds. Someone showing up at the front door. But
Will you take care? Thank you.
You know,
Thanks
for
tuning
having
in, David.
me on, George. As always, keep up the wonderful work representing these high end horologery. And thanks for having me on.
Thanks, my friend. We'll see you soon.
All right,
Take
be
care,
well.
David. Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, I think that was a great question. You know, so we're diversifying a little bit. We're hitting, you know, new products like you saw the Urushi lacquer in that $25,000 to $30,000 range, the yellow gold snowflake. We're introducing that stuff, and we're coming out with like the, you know, when it was Basel World in 2019, or you know, what would have been our Grand Seiko Summit in Japan this year, but was basically everything was announced virtually. You know, we announced the big price point stuff, but we still introduce a lot of in that core. We don't forget that core price point. So,
more questions. Brendan Cunningham wants to know: will the 60th anniversary event be rescheduled?
So the Grand Seiko Summit in Japan, that event.
I think that's what he's referring to. That, you know, was going to happen earlier this year.
I wish we just opened the new factory, the new studio Shizukuishi, and unfortunately none of our team from Tokyo attended that either. So I don't think we'll be planning any events in the immediate future. And I would assume at this point we're getting closer and closer to the end of the year that we will likely not have the event in Japan. We pretty much announced it all virtually, so. You know, we're just like everyone else. We're all hoping that life gets back to normal soon, but you know, we got to play it by ear at this point.
All right, Joe. So I'm going to hit you with the last question myself here.
Okay.
What watch ideally would you like to see the brand make the most? If you saw your ideal watch, what do you want to see them do? If you're sitting in the R&D room and say, "Hey guys, this is what you got to do next."
Well, I think that realistically, like one of my right now, outside of like things that already exist, like the 8-day movement and stuff like that, the thing I'm most enamored with is this new high beat 9SA5 caliber that we introduced this year. So to see that in something that I can afford would be, you know, I think great. You know, it's a limited edition of only 100 pieces. So, you know, and it's gold, 43,000. It's not something attainable. I think that the investment in 10 years, almost 10 years of research and development in this new escapement, this new movement that we have, you know, I hope to see something that's a little more achievable in price point. So I think that would be right now. I don't even care about the dial or anything. I just want that movement.
Mm-hmm. That says something there coming from
I
you.
need it on my wrist. Like, you can design it however you want. I trust them. I trust the designers. That's fine. Give me something with that movement.
Sunflowerman, let's see where you stand before we take off.
Yeah, I just applied the green
coming together.
to the hands there. So we got our color
Excellent.
going on. Zoom out just a little bit, get some context. So here's where we're at.
Let's
I'll
see the
probably
watch
end
on
up-
your wrist.
Oh, right. Let's,
That is
let's
so
compare
cool.
There
these.
we go. How great is that? Amazing.
That is awesome.
I'll probably add a bit of a glare up here, a nice little highlight, and then maybe a little more black in a couple of areas, but otherwise, just about there.
Incredible. Good stuff. Well, that's all the time we have, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, if you did not get to ask your question, please email us at rsvp@watchbox.com and we'll get to it. We appreciate you joining us tonight. Special thanks again to my co-panelists, Joe Kirk and the one and only Sunflowerman. I need to get me one of those top hats. Please keep in touch and follow WatchBox, Grand Seiko, and Sunflowerman on Instagram. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much again. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.